My supervisor told me during a one-on-one, "You're too quiet to ever be taken seriously. Maybe stick to fetching coffee." When I presented an idea later that week, he laughed and said, "See, no backbone." So I smiled, nodded, and let him take credit. Then I showed up at a senior leadership meeting with a full timeline of every time he had used my work as his own. The look on his face when they asked him to leave the room was priceless. I've always been quiet. I don't mean shy. I just don't talk unless I have something worth saying. I don't like drama. I don't try to be the center of attention. But in some workplaces, especially in the tech industry, people mistake quiet for weak. That's how I ended up with a manager like Dean. I work in Raleigh, North Carolina, at a tech company that builds back-end software for logistics companies. We're not a startup, but we're not huge either. Around 300 employees. I started there 4 years ago, right out of grad school. I was one of the youngest analysts on the team. Over time, I built a reputation for being reliable, smart, and precise. I wasn't flashy, but I got stuff done. Then Dean showed up. He came from a consulting firm, and from the first meeting, it was clear he thought he was better than the rest of us. Loud. Full of buzzwords. Always making sure people knew when he was talking. Wore too much cologne. Called everyone boss, even though nobody liked it. At first, I stayed neutral. I figured he was just trying too hard. But it got worse. Our first one-on-one was a mess. He leaned back in his chair, grinned like he knew something I didn't, and said, "You're too quiet to ever be taken seriously. Maybe stick to fetching coffee." I actually thought I misheard him. I laughed a little, assuming he was joking. He didn't laugh back. He was serious. I didn't know what to say. I'd never had a manager speak to me like that. I just nodded, swallowed it, and left the meeting. A few days later, I was in a team meeting where I presented an idea I'd spent weeks working on. It was a new framework to help the dev and product teams work together in real time. I had charts, numbers, everything. It was solid. Dean let me get about 1 minute in before he cut me off. "See what I mean?" he said, laughing like I was part of some inside joke. "No backbone. This stuff's too big for her." Some people in the room laughed, but it was uncomfortable. I just nodded and let him finish. Then I watched him rephrase what I said, pretend it was his idea, and pitch it like he was the genius in the room. That was the moment I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue with him. I wasn't going to fight him in public. I was going to let him keep taking credit for my work. And I was going to use it to ruin him. The first thing I did was start tracking everything. Every email, every deck, every outline. I saved copies. I kept versions. When Dean asked me to clean up something so he could fine-tune the language, I saved the original and made a note of when and how he used it. I BCC'd myself on emails. I took screenshots of Slack conversations. I built a digital folder labeled, "For when the time comes." It started happening more and more. Dean got comfortable. He stopped even pretending to contribute. He would say things like, "Throw together some slides for me. Put this in bullet points so I can pitch it. You're good with the boring stuff. I'll handle the vision part." The part that really burned me? Leadership bought it. He started getting attention from the VP of product. They praised his ability to turn ideas into strategy. One director even told me, "You're lucky to have a manager who knows how to communicate your work so well." I smiled. I said thanks. But I started planning something more. I knew about the annual leadership summit. It was the one time each year when all senior execs got in a room with a select group of emerging talent. I also knew Dean was gunning for a promotion. He kept hinting about it in meetings. He thought he had it in the bag. I quietly asked HR if I could volunteer to help plan the summit. They were short on hands. They said yes. That gave me access to the attendee list, the agenda, and the people who'd be in the room. It also gave me time to build my case. For the next 3 weeks, I worked late almost every night building a dossier. I included original drafts of my work corresponding emails where Dean asked for help, recordings from Zoom meetings, company policy allowed it with consent. He gave it every time, screenshots of Slack convos, calendar invites showing when I sent things versus when he presented them. Everything was organized, cross-referenced, and labeled. I even included a few side-by-sides showing how he took my slides and changed only the title. The night before the summit, I stayed up till 3 a.m. printing everything. 10 copies. Each one in its own folder. The next morning I walked into the summit with my head high. They gave me a lanyard labeled Observer. I wasn't on the agenda, but I was allowed in the room. Dean didn't even notice me at first. About halfway through the session, he stood up to give a presentation on department innovation. His entire deck was stuff I had written. He didn't change a single bullet point. He even used my exact phrasing in some spots. When he finished, the room applauded. That's when I stood up. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, loud enough that it echoed. Everyone turned to look. Dean stared at me like I'd grown 2 heads. "I think it's important that this room sees something before we continue." I walked up and passed out the folders. No drama. No yelling. Just receipts. The silence was heavy. You could hear people flipping pages. Eyes widened. The VP leaned in closer. Our COO took off his glasses and started reading slowly. Our HR director looked pissed. "Dean," the COO said quietly, "can we speak to you outside for a moment?" Dean's face dropped. He looked around, then tried to smile. "Sure. Yeah. Of course." He didn't come back in. After Dean got walked out of the room, the summit moved on like nothing happened. Sort of. You could feel the tension. Some people couldn't even make eye contact with me. Others were staring a little too long. But no one said anything. Not yet. After the session, I was pulled aside by the VP of Product and the HR director. They asked me to meet with them the next morning to go over everything in detail. I agreed. Then I left the summit and drove straight home. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept playing it over in my head. What I did. How fast it all changed. Part of me felt relief. But another part of me kept waiting for the fallout. Because people like Dean, they don't just go quietly. The next day at work, his office was dark. No one told us anything officially. Just a short email from HR. "Dean will no longer be with the company. Please direct any department questions to interim manager." And just like that, he was gone. First I thought it was over. But then I noticed the whispers. A few of Dean's buddies, guys in other departments who liked the way he cut through the noise, started acting cold. One of them, Jared, who worked in sales ops, walked past my desk and muttered, "Careful who you throw under the bus." Another day, I found that someone had unassigned me from a few shared drives I had full access to before.
No explanación.
Just gone. I brought it up to IT. They claimed it was a glitch. I didn't buy it. That week, I got left off a few calendar invites I was normally part of. Meetings I used to run suddenly being held without me. When I brought it up, I was told, "We just figured you were focused on bigger things now." I could see what was happening. The same people who cheered Dean on were starting to paint me as a problem. Not because I did something wrong, but because I didn't stay quiet. I started documenting again. Not just files or data. Behavior. Who said what? Who left me off what? Who tried to ice me out? A week later, I got an email. No subject line. Just one sentence inside. "You think this is over?" It came from a personal Gmail account. No name. No signature. I stared at it for a long time. At first, I thought maybe it was Dean. But something felt off. The tone wasn't his. It was more emotional. Less cocky. So I dug. I remembered a day, about 2 months ago, when one of Dean's old team members, Maya, had been in tears after a meeting. She left early and never came back to our department. Rumor was she asked to be transferred. I emailed her. Told her what happened at the summit. Told her what I was dealing with now. Her response? One line. "You're not the first. You just lasted longer." We scheduled a call. What she told me changed everything. Maya had been reporting to Dean before I did. She'd been the one keeping his reports clean. Cleaning up his language. Making sure his numbers matched. He took credit for her work too, but it went deeper than that. He'd corner her in meetings. Ask personal questions. Make comments about how she dressed too serious for someone her age. The last straw? He told her during a happy hour that she wasn't promotable because she didn't flirt enough. She filed a report. HR looked into it. But nothing came of it. That's when she asked for the transfer. When Dean found out, he started quietly pushing people to stop involving her in cross-team projects. called her difficult in meetings, said she had an attitude. She'd kept her head down ever since. I knew he was bad, she told me, but I thought I was alone. She wasn't. After we talked, she introduced me to two other women, both former employees. One had left the company completely. The other had taken a demotion to get away from him. Same story. Same pattern. And now that he was gone, someone else was trying to make sure people like me didn't get too comfortable. Because the truth was, Dean hadn't just failed upward alone, he'd pulled others with him. A few days later, HR reached out again. They wanted to meet with me about the summit documents. At first, I assumed it was just a follow-up. But when I got to the room, I noticed something weird. The VP of product wasn't there. Just two HR reps. And the director of legal. They asked me if I still had the original files. The emails. The screen recordings. I said yes. Then they asked if I had shared them with anyone outside the company. I said no, but I was getting the sense I probably should. They danced around it, but the message was clear. The company didn't want this going beyond what had already happened. They appreciated me bringing this to light, but they didn't want internal matters damaging public perception. I wasn't even angry. I was calm. I thanked them for their time. Then I went home and opened my laptop. I wrote everything down. Every detail. Every message. Every twist. Not to post yet. But just in case. Because I realized something then. Dean was just the tip of it. The real problem was the people who let him rise in the first place. And now they were trying to pretend it never happened. I wasn't going to let that happen. Not again. I didn't tell HR, but after that last meeting, I made a decision. I started quietly reaching out to the others. Maya, the two former employees, even one of Dean's old direct reports who had switched companies. I told them what I was putting together. I asked if they'd be willing to write something down, just a statement. Nothing formal yet. Just truth. Within a week, I had 5 detailed accounts from 5 different women. All of them told some version of the same story. Manipulation, idea theft, inappropriate remarks, and pressure to stay quiet. And all of them had gone to HR in some way, at some point. And HR had done nothing. I was no longer just dealing with a bad manager. I was staring straight at a system that protected people like him. So I started building something new. I created a secure folder outside the company. Encrypted. Password protected. Inside everything. The summit presentation, the screenshots, emails, internal chat logs. But now it also had something else, statements from those women, fully anonymized but with enough detail to show the pattern. I labeled the document, what they didn't want the board to see. And I kept updating it every day. A few days later, I got a strange message from Jared, the sales ops guy who used to be close with Dean. It was casual at first. Hey, a few of us are grabbing drinks after work, you should come by. I ignored it. He sent another one. Just want to clear the air. No hard feelings, right? That's when I knew something was up. This guy hadn't said 2 words to me in the last year, unless it was to make a passive jab. Now suddenly he wanted to be friends? I said I was busy. 2 hours later, I got an invite to a cross-functional innovation review, scheduled for the next morning. Calendar event created by Jared. No agenda. Just titled, Open Discussion. I clicked on the invite list. 3 names popped up. Jared, me, and Dean. That was impossible. Dean was fired, right? I emailed HR. Can you confirm if Dean is still with the company in any capacity? No reply. I tried calling the HR director's line. Straight to voicemail. Then I called Maya. Check Slack, she said. I opened Slack and typed Dean's name into the search bar. Nothing showed up under active users. But in the admin log, under permissions change, I saw something. Access restored, external consultant temporary, Dean A. My stomach dropped. He wasn't back as an employee. They brought him back as a consultant. Off the books. Which meant the same people who told me they were grateful I'd spoken up were now quietly sneaking him back in through a side door. Probably hoping I'd be too intimidated or too isolated to push back again. They were testing me. And I was done playing fair. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up writing an email, not just any email. This one was going straight to the company's board of directors. I knew most employees wouldn't dare contact them directly. I also knew the names of 2 board members who were deeply invested in company culture and PR. One of them had even written a public op-ed about integrity in leadership. I used their own words in the subject line. Integrity in leadership, a situation you should know about before the press does. Inside the email, I wrote a plain fact-based summary. No anger. No emotion. Just evidence. Dean's internal behavior, his misuse of staff contributions, HR's repeated failure to act, the retaliation after his firing, the quiet attempt to bring him back as a consultant, and finally, the pattern of protecting senior staff while isolating those who speak up. I included a private link to the folder. I made sure the audit log showed who viewed it and when. Then I hit send. Within 2 hours, the link had been opened 5 times, once from a device tagged mobile, iOS in San Francisco, and another from a Windows workstation in Boston. That's when I knew the board had seen it. And now there was no way to pretend it hadn't happened. 2 days later, someone from IT anonymously sent me a message through an encrypted note platform. No Zendaname. Just this. Watch your permissions. They're trying to freeze your access. Also, Dean's working through a third-party shell to avoid legal exposure. He's still getting paid. I checked my access logs. Sure enough, someone had flagged my credentials for review. They were trying to shut me down from the inside before the board could act. They wanted to cut me off, erase the records, bury the documents, and claim I misunderstood everything. But it was already too late for that, because I didn't just send the email to the board. I sent it to myself, to Maya, to 2 other former employees, and I scheduled it to auto-send to a reporter if anything happened to my account. I'd waited long enough. Let them take enough. Now, I was the one holding the match. And I wasn't done yet. After I saw the anonymous IT warning, I moved fast. That same night, I logged into a secure workspace I'd created outside the company's network. I backed up every single file one more time and locked it behind a new password. I printed 2 physical copies of everything and left one with a friend just in case. They could try to freeze my access, but they couldn't touch what I had off their servers. The next morning, I walked into the office like nothing had changed. People stared, whispered. The air felt heavier than usual. I knew why. By noon, I was officially locked out of my work email. No warning. No explanation. Just a pop-up that said, "Your session has expired. Please contact your administrator." So I did. I walked straight to HR. They acted surprised. "Oh, that's strange," the director said, flipping through her notes like she hadn't planned it all. "Must be a system issue." "Is it a system issue?" I asked. "Or is this about the consultant you illegally rehired?" She froze. Her mouth twitched like she didn't know what to say. So I leaned in. Because if I don't get full access back in 10 minutes, the documents go public.
No bluff.
I had everything prepped. News outlets.
Online forum.
The board. My LinkedIn. She stood up, walked out of the room, and came back 5 minutes later. "You'll be reinstated immediately. Please don't act impulsively." But it was too late for that. Way too late. While all this was happening, something else was going on in the background. A senior board member had contacted me directly the night before. I didn't recognize the number, but I picked up. The voice was calm, older, serious. "We've read everything," he said. "And we're looking into it. Please stay quiet for now. We need to do this right." So I gave him a few days. But I didn't slow down. Because here's what I found. Dean hadn't just been hired as a consultant. He had been funneled back into the company through a third-party contracting firm run by his old college roommate. A shell company, paid under a fake project title. I traced the invoice. And the signature on it? One of the VPs. The same VP who praised Dean in the town hall. That's when I realized the problem wasn't Dean alone. It was an entire chain of people, middle to upper management, protecting each other, lying on records, manipulating staff, and throwing money at anyone who kept their mouth shut. And this time I didn't just have documents. I had names, timestamps, money trails. 3 days later, I got an email from the board member. "We're ready." What followed was a company-wide emergency all-hands meeting. Mandatory. No agenda. When I joined the video call, over 200 people were logged in. On camera, the CEO. 2 board members. The legal counsel. And no one from HR. Not one VP. Not even the interim manager. Effective immediately, the CEO said. We're launching a full internal restructuring following the outcome of an independent investigation. Certain members of leadership have been removed pending further review. Names started flashing across the screen. Dean permanently banned from consulting with the company or any partner firm. 3 VPs placed on unpaid leave under investigation. 2 HR directors terminated. Then silence. Until they brought up my name. But not to fire me. To promote me. Effective immediately, I was being offered the role of Director of Product Integrity and Ethics, a newly formed position reporting directly to the board, built to make sure this never happened again. And then the CEO did something I didn't expect. He apologized. Not a cold legal apology. Not a rehearsed one. A real one. He admitted they had failed people like me. Failed to listen. Failed to act. And now they were paying for it. Dean tried to fight back. Filed a wrongful termination suit. But I'd already turned over the invoice trail to a journalist friend who specialized in corporate corruption. Within a week, a full article was published exposing the whole operation. His name trended for all the wrong reasons. That third-party contracting firm? It got flagged by the IRS. His consulting career? Dead. The HR director? Turns out she'd been part of a network covering up multiple employee complaints over the years. One of her certifications was pulled. Another company that had just offered her a job pulled the offer once the article went public. The VP who signed the false contract? He resigned to pursue personal opportunities. Translation: no one would hire him after that story came out. I accepted the new role, but with one condition. I wanted the right to build an internal anonymous reporting system, completely separate from HR. They gave it to me. Now, every complaint is logged directly with oversight from the board. And every single employee who had been isolated, ignored, or punished for speaking up. They were invited to confidential listening sessions. Some even received financial settlements for what they went through. But I didn't take one. Because what I wanted wasn't money. It was change. And I got it. I used to think being quiet made me weak. But now I know it's the quiet ones people should watch out for. Because we see everything. And when we strike, we don't miss.